Hi, Mark Gideon here, talking about dealing with skunks and difficult people. Ever think that maybe you were dealing with a skunk when you were dealing with a difficult person? Let's talk about skunks a little bit. Had a little bit of experience with a skunk once. I was working as a security guard. I was teaching in a Christian school. We had our second child and made an agreement with the doctor in the hospital that we would pay, so much a month over a period of time. So I got a job over the weekend, two 12-hour shifts, working nights. And I was working in Cleveland at a foundry, and in Cleveland, I mean, like Cleveland, like West 74th Street type Cleveland. And I was working nights at a foundry as a security guard. Everyone's gone, just trying to protect the property. And one night I took my lunch out to the picnic area outside and sat down there. And of course, it was kind of dark. Some street lights and things lighting up the area a little bit. Sitting there eating, and all of a sudden, I see a skunk coming towards me, and I'm sitting there thinking like, "Oh no." We're in the middle of Cleveland. How do you get a skunk in the middle of Cleveland? The skunk starts walking, waddling under the table, coming towards me. And I'm thinking like, oh man, what are my options? One option was to just sort of, drop kick it, just boom, kick that thing out of the way, and get away. That would be one option. Another option would be to, Barney Fife style, take that one bullet out of my pocket, put it into my chamber of my gun. No, they give me more than one bullet, but and just take and just boom, shoot it, right? That wouldn't be real good to do that in the middle of the city either. None of those things seem really a good option, if you know what I mean. Same way with working with some people. You have a conflict and you think like, what am I going to do? This looks like a lose-lose situation. In that situation with the skunk, I decided I wanted the skunk to know I was there because she were kind of oblivious to me, just kind of walking, like I said, towards me. And so I kind of shuffled my feet a little bit. I didn't want to scare the skunk. And so I made a little bit of noise. The skunk looked up at me and then went off a different direction. And that seemed to work too. And I'm going to use that as kind of an analogy for what maybe we should do as well. If we look at this thing biblically, there's an interesting set of proverbs that are right beside each other.
Proverbs 26:4 says, "Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest thou also be like unto him." Proverbs 26:5 says, "Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own conceit."
So one verse is saying, don't answer. The other verse says, answer. Well, what do you do? I think if you look at those passages, and we'll post them up here, is that one is saying, if you answer, give validity, credence to what's being said, you will kind of be joining into this like stupid conversation, and it's not going to go anywhere because they're a fool. They really don't want to know. And I think we've all probably met people at one time or another who really just don't want to know. The truth is, I mean, you answer one question and they bring up another question, or they won't, listen to what you say. They're not really listening. They're listening to argue, with you. They're not wanting to learn. There's no humbleness there. And, we've all been in those kinds of situations. The other thing too is if you don't answer them, then they think like they've got you, aha, so you couldn't answer, and it's not that you can't answer. It's just that it's kind of like fighting with a skunk. It's kind of like, the skunk comes up to you and you kick it. Well, that just doesn't go well, which reminds me of a story of a pastor told me when he was a teenager. he was about to go out the door to go to school, and he saw a skunk on the front porch. He went and grabbed a rifle, kind of eased it outside, opened up the door a little bit, and went boom, and of course missed. Of course, the skunk did its thing, and nobody wanted to be around him for a few days, and nobody could come into the house for a few days. And it left an oil spot. He said it was a green oil spot on the porch, on the wood, and they eventually had to cut those boards out once they could get back into the house. But, somehow fighting with a skunk is just not a good idea. Fighting with some fools, some cantankerous people, it doesn't seem like a good option. And so I look at that part of the scripture, and I always thought that, what it meant was you just kind of weigh it out. Sometimes, because of the type of situation, you go ahead and answer them, even though it's kind of futile, at least for the people around that may hear the conversation or be involved. They'll at least know what the truth is, even if that individual doesn't know about it. Then that's not a bad strategy. And there are other times when, it's just not worth it. You're fighting with a skunk. You can beat a skunk. I mean, you can take a club and you can beat a skunk. I mean, you can kill it. It's just not a very pleasant outcome. And so, that's the way I interpreted that for a long time. And then, I read something, and I don't remember where the source was. It's been a while ago, that talked about the fact that maybe you ought to answer kind of like Jesus did with the Pharisees and the Sadducees trying to ask him questions, and they really were just trying to trip him up. One of the questions they asked was concerning about marriage in heaven and those kinds of things. And a man, marries one wife and she dies. Then he marries another woman and she dies. He marries another one and she dies, and he marries another one, and so he marries 7 women. And then they ask the question like, well, who's going to be his wife, in the resurrection? Because he didn't believe in the resurrection, at least that particular group and that particular questioning. And Jesus didn't answer that question directly. He said, he talked about angels and they're not given in marriage and those kinds of things. He kind of went to the root cause of the problem was that they're not understanding Scripture. And they certainly didn't understand Scripture if they didn't believe in the resurrection. And so he didn't answer them according to what they were talking about in one sense. And yet he was answering it because he was getting to a root problem. And so our mission here, this channel, is to talk about life, conflict, living, all those different issues, and then also look at Scripture. And at times, we're also going to be looking at a lot of what may fall in the category of self-help. We're going to talk about things about how to better your life and use different tools. I like to say that I'm a Christian leadership junkie. I very much love Scripture. Scripture is, what I'm into. And I'm very much into things like 7 Habits, Donald Miller's book, Hero on a Mission. There are a wide number of books that have a lot of good things about life. And then there are also, I feel like, parts of a lot of these different books, like 7 Habits and things, a lot of other self-help books. We're talking about goals and different tools to better yourself, have some weaknesses to them because they don't bring in the full, body of a Christian worldview. And so I always want to tie those things together for you in these, going forward. So we look forward to having you for the next things. Stay away from skunks. Believe me, it won't turn out well.